Welcome back to A Writer's Mind. I am your host, DelSheree Spinner, and I am back to kind of catching up on what I had gotten written on the not karmic book, Penelope's story now. And this chapter, I'm going to talk about how things are kind of breaking open for the reader in this chapter. This is a longer chapter. It ended up being about 2,800 words. So a little bit longer than what I had been doing in some of the earlier chapters. And kind of just, I've noticed like where my preferences have changed. I'm kind of working on revising one of my other books. And I noticed like, geez, some of those chapters were like 4, 5, 6,000 words long. I'm like, oh, that's too much. Like, it's a long time to not give the reader a break. So this one is a bit of a longer chapter than what I preferred. And there is kind of like 2 sections to it where I could maybe split, but like the first section is too short to be its own chapter, so I decided to keep the whole chapter together. So we'll see. It may get, trimmed or split at some point in the future. But for now, this is the chapter where Penelope has to meet with her pastor. And this is referenced in chapter 1 and 2 that she's going to have to go to this meeting later in the day. And I had kind of debated, like, did I need to show anything else in the school setting before we moved to here? In the original version, I kept Beatrix as, at the time Sage, kept her in the school setting a little bit longer. But I think what I accomplished in chapter 2 and 3 was enough to, again, kind of like show that second world that she lives, that second identity that she has, and to plant some clues and hints of some of the conflict that's coming up. So I kind of just skip the last half of the day at school and move on to her visit with the pastor. But I don't go right into the pastor. In the original version, I'd had the main character have a conversation with the pastor's receptionist first. And I had used that originally to clue in Beatrix as the investigator into some of the less obvious parts of Sage's life that her friends at school did not know about, and that the initial kind of like scouting report didn't really catch on to either. So in the original version, it was more of giving clues to Beatrix to kind of set her on the trail. Obviously, we don't have any of the investigation part in the story now. So what this, especially the first section of this chapter, what it's meant to do for the reader now is to not only like give some background, but to give the reader a little bit more context into why Penelope is so devoted to just keeping things as even as possible until her 18th birthday. And you get more of a sense of what she's been dealing with for her whole life, but especially for the last like 3-4 years, where things have been the worst for her, particularly because of her family kind of realizing who she is and her identity, and then trying to bury that and force it out of her mind as much as possible. So a lot of the conversation with the receptionist with Mrs. Welch is pretty similar from the original version. So Mrs. Welch tries to, give her what she thinks is this inspiring story about her daughter and her relationship with her daughter and how much Pastor Barnum was able to help. It doesn't land well because I think aside from maybe like a specific set of readers who probably are not going to read this book anyway, I don't think anybody would find Mrs. Welch's story particularly inspiring or helpful. What it really does is highlight the strictness of the view of this congregation that Penelope has been raised in, and how much you have to twist your mind in order to stay devoted to a super strict faith like this. So Mrs. Welch tells her about her daughter, who is gay, who is we discover kind of at the end of their conversation, in a relationship with another woman, and they have a baby. And so she's trying to tell Penelope how all the years that her daughter spent working with Pastor Barnum, even though it didn't, in her mind, unfortunately, it didn't, convert her back to being heterosexual, because she has in her mind that this was a challenge that she was supposed to overcome. And so Mrs. Welch believes that her daughter has failed this test that God gave her. And this is something coming from my own background and the spiritual faith community that I was raised in. That was kind of the attitude that I learned as well. Like, that was told to me that anything other than heterosexuality was a test from God, and you had to overcome it, even if that meant, remaining celibate your entire life, or if it meant, kind of just doing your best to push through in a hetero relationship, whether that really was like fulfilling or physically appetizing, that, you push through, you had to overcome it. This was a test from God. So I'm kind of bringing that in from like my background of things that I was taught in the religion I grew up in, and kind of taking it to a next level as well. And I think that's an attitude that still is fairly common in highly conservative viewpoints that do not embrace any identity other than heterosexual in that realm. So I think that that's something that people can relate to and understand both sides, where Penelope is extremely put off by this story about how the pastor helped them basically accept that Mrs. Welch's daughter is going to hell. She's chosen the worldly path. There's nothing they can do at this point. So quit being angry about it. Enjoy your time on earth, because when they die, she's, the daughter's going to go to hell, and Mrs. Welch will be in heaven because she's obviously better than her daughter. And so, finding kind of some peace and acceptance, which in some of those situations, that probably is the best you can hope for, that you're just not constantly fighting about it. But Penelope is angered by this conversation. And when the pastor calls her in to, start their discussion, it's already off to a bad start. So this is one of those instances where, she's doing the things her parents told her to go to this meeting. So she's going, she's gonna, play the part of dutiful daughter who's doing what she's supposed to do, and she's trying to fix herself, but she's already been set off by this conversation. So she goes in kind of ready for a fight, and she just can't hold back, can't resist poking at everything the pastor says. So we get a bit more of those flaws in this chapter, kind of building on chapter 1, where she really tries to stay out of their attention, to just, keep a low profile. But when she's pushed hard enough, she's going to react. She's going to lean into those emotions that are really strong, really at the surface and present at this point, especially when she's like weeks from what she views as freedom from all of it. And so this is a situation where she can't. She's honest. She pushes back against the pastor. They kind of verbally duke it out a bit, where he's pushing, love of God and scripture and prayer, and, isn't it worth your soul? And she kind of claps back like, I don't believe in souls, and your God is not my God, and I honestly don't give a rat's ass about any of this. So we see this more combative nature that I think in the first couple of chapters, readers have a sense of. It's been hinted at. And so I'm hoping that this kind of comes across as they've been getting this idea that there's this anger, this energy boiling underneath Penelope's skin, and 95% of the time, she keeps it at that level. And she puts on a show, she performs, she does what she needs to do, but it's there. And this, it's not like a major blow up where she's, screaming and yelling, but you get this side of Penelope, of her pushing back and not backing down and saying some of her own true thoughts, even though she knows this is going to come back to bite her in the ass. Because the pastor just admits that he tells her mom everything that they talk about, basically. And he puts it under kind of this caveat of like, she's a minor, so he's allowed to discuss her spiritual development or potential dangers with her parents. And the dad's not really mentioned here on whether he's getting these updates. This is the highest concern to the mom. And they get into the conversation because, as kind of was hinted at in chapter 3, this is where we get a little bit more information about the parents' background. And the pastor is actually surprised to learn that the mom wants to go back to the cult. that, he sees her as this 100%, 1,000% devoted congregant. She's there helping. She's always involved. Every meeting, every service, she's there. She is like the ideal member. And so when he hears that, like, this is just her biding her time until she can get back to the true religion that she wants to be part of, he is surprised by this, because even though, like, he doesn't want to use the word cult, like, obviously he thinks his version of this religion is the best one, and he can't really understand why she would want to go back to this group that has kicked them out. I'm trying to, without having to, like, explain too much, give the reader a better sense of who the parents are and why they treat Penelope and the other kids the way that they do. And so in this, using this as an opportunity for characterization of both the mom and the dad, we've already established that the mom is unstable, particularly on an emotional level. She's extremely reactive. She can't control how she responds in a lot of cases, at least at home. In my mind, she does better at that at work because it's a more fast-paced and controlled environment. She's a nurse. She has to deal with emergencies, so she can just kind of operate at that high level of stress and anxiety. But when she comes home, that's where she loses control and blows up. And religion is a way for her to try to have control and stability. If it's, enough structure, enough control, basically, like, she functions better. And she misses being in that cult environment where every aspect of her life was controlled. She didn't have to make as many decisions and think as hard, or try to interpret the right way. Like, it was just, that was already established. So it hopefully is kind of like giving the reader a little bit more insight into her instability and her goals, that she needs to have this perfect family in her mind in order to get back into the Adamic cult. And as Penelope is kind of just briefly, like, mentioning this and her perspective of her parents, I'm trying to have this be, like, fairly layered. Like, not a lot is explained, but hopefully it's coming across these, like, deeper ideas of who the parents are with limited, like, in-your-face details. Like, she's going to mention a few things. She mentions that her dad doesn't necessarily want to go back to the cult, that he's actually pretty happy being in charge. Like, his family is his own little cult that he gets to control and push around and all of that, and he actually likes that. So we've got kind of these opposing goals between her mother and her father as well, that I'm hinting in this chapter that's going to kind of open up later on and cause some conflict between the two of them, but also that's going to relate into the conflict that they jointly have with Penelope as well. So again, kind of more hints and establishing of the conflict that is coming up, but also I think this chapter is especially focused on characterization, not only giving a little bit of backstory, but using some of that backstory to help explain who the parents are and why they treat her the way that they do. And I'm trying to do that without being too explaining. Like, there's a lot of dialogue in this chapter, so again, that's kind of one of those things I'll be looking for feedback on from betas and an editor on, like, is this too much talking? Because I don't want to info dump. I don't want this to, like, drag. I want this to be an intense conversation that is giving you just enough information to help the reader form some connections and further develop their perception of who the parents are, what the situation is at home, and more direct information as far as, like, what Penelope says and her thoughts related to her family that help them get a better sense of who she is. Because I guess, like I've talked about, Penelope kind of has these three different identities and worlds of home and school and then out of the public eye. And I guess these scenes where she's going to have these conversations with the pastor kind of act as bridges between some of those different worlds. because he gets under her skin, so she's often more honest with him than she means to be. Again, because she reacts, she can't help it when he pushes her buttons too much. She's gonna kind of let some stuff fly that normally she would keep to herself and sit on and not risk that information being brought out. And this is also the chapter where more concretely, like I do just kind of directly tell the reader that Penelope is attracted to women. Her mother kind of figured this out when she was about 11. So that's when things, like her home life has always been chaotic and stressful and controlling and all of that. But at age 11 is when the reader gets the sense that like things turned even worse and these meetings with the pastor started. So this has been an ongoing thing for a while and then kind of intensified again at the point where she starts dating and sleeping with Kendall. So the pastor has kind of been involved in all of this for at least 7 years, and for the past like 3-4 years, even more intensely as he's trying to, fix Penelope once kind of more of her life choices and how she's dealing with it as that becomes more of a problem for the mom. Her efforts have kind of stepped up and intensified along the way. And so we're kind of getting a fair amount of backstory, but hopefully not with too many words. Like I give small details that I think will coalesce into bigger ideas in the reader's mind is my hope. So hopefully that's working. But just, a lot of character development in this chapter. Interestingly enough, for two characters who aren't even in the scene, you get a lot more characterization for the mom and the dad. You also get a sense of who this pastor is, that he does seem to believe in what he's teaching and what he's trying to get Penelope to understand, but he's also not fully aware of the situation. He doesn't really understand what Penelope and her siblings are going through. He thinks he's helping. He isn't a trusted adult that Penelope could potentially go to later because he is more concerned and more connected with her mom than he is with her. So kind of contrasting that with the English teacher from the earlier chapter. He's there, he's involved, but he's not the person that he thinks he is for Penelope in his view. He is like the ultimate trusted adult outside her family. But really, he's not at all. He is very much a threat to her in the sense that anything she says without thinking is going to get back to her parents very quickly. And that can cause some major problems for her. And he doesn't realize that. I'm kind of trying to give the sense with the pastor that like he is generally like good-hearted, not 100%. Like he's not completely sympathetic. But he does believe in what he's doing and what he's saying. But I think the reader's perception is also going to be that like he's going about it the wrong way, that he should be more of a support and confidant for Penelope, that he shouldn't immediately run to her mom to report everything that they discussed, that's not right. Even if he has like his reasoning of like that's part of his job is to work with the parents to help protect and teach her. He's not discerning in the way that he updates the mom. He just kind of like vomits everything back out without enough sense of this could cause problems. I might be making the situation worse. He really doesn't understand that. And so he's a threat in Penelope's mind, and I think in the reader's mind as well. And we'll see the outcome of that in a couple more chapters. But I wanted to kind of introduce him and give readers a sense of who he is, kind of where he lies as far as alliances, and his potential for causing conflict and major problems for Penelope as they move forward in the story. Because there's a lot of layers of conflict in this story, and we really haven't even got to the main thing that's going to happen. Kind of the climactic moment here. I haven't even like touched on that hardly. In chapter 2, Penelope brings up her phone and there's a text that says like next question mark. And in that chapter, there's an interaction with just kind of a nasty student who's just awful to the teacher and just kind of just really bitchy. And she replies to that text with that student's name. And that is a hint at the major conflict of the plot. But the reader has no idea what that even means at that point, and I don't really come back around to that for a little while. So that part is hidden, but all of the other layers of conflict that are going to build up to what brings Penelope to the climax are all being established in these early chapters here. And the last bit that I have written at this point is chapter 5. And this kind of builds on what I was establishing in the previous chapter, both in regards to her interactions with her family. And then this is where I introduce kind of this third world that Penelope inhabits, as well as her partner in this third world. So first, the chapter kind of opens up with her having to leave the house. She has fulfilled like her duties with her mom working, that she needed to be home to deal with the kids and the homework and the dinner and the cleanup and all the stuff that her mom would normally at least partially be responsible for. And it's setting kind of that clear expectation of gender roles in a very short amount of space. It's brought up early in chapter 1, and it's continued here that none of this is the dad's job. He firmly has that attitude of, outside of controlling and making sure things are going exactly how he wants, it is not his responsibility to deal with cooking or cleaning or rearing of the children, certainly not helping with homework or being a supportive presence in their life. So we get that reinforced here at the beginning of the chapter. And she has to kind of get out of the house and perform to get past her father, who is questioning her, even though she's already stated she's going to a study group. He still kind of has to get that little nudge of control and double check and demand answers and make sure, she knows exactly when she's supposed to be home and all of that. And so we see her fall into that. Yes, sir, I'll be home. Of course, I'll do whatever you want, right after we've just seen her fighting back with the pastor. It's like, we know it's there. We know she can fight back, but she's definitely not going to do it at home with her dad. So she's got these different identities that come into play depending on the situation. And so we've kind of seen almost all of them. And then this last part of the chapter is where you finally get a look at who Penelope is when nobody else is trying to control her, and where she is free to do what she wants, to do what she feels she needs to do in order to further her own goals and ambitions. So after she leaves her family home, this is also where the reader is going to get their first look at what is actually going to bring to light the main conflict of the story. What has all of this other stuff built toward? And you're going to see kind of the path that Penelope has chosen to take to get away from all of this. And this is where this is going to be the test for the reader. And again, I'm going to have to see where the responses lie as far as, maintaining that likability, the sympathy, just how I'm portraying her, because I need her to stay likable enough that the reader keeps rooting for her. And so that was kind of something I was challenged with this chapter was how far can I push her without pushing the reader away? And in this chapter, it's kind of just the first little bit of it, but it gets worse from here. So it's going to be a fine line that I'm trying to walk with her. Also, I'm having to really think about how much do I want to actually put on the page with this part of the storyline? Because basically, what you see in this chapter, she leaves the house she says to go to her study group. She's got finals and AP stuff coming up, but what she's really doing is she's meeting Aria. And this is the first time readers will hear this name or have any sense of who Aria is. in the original version, we start the story with Arya missing, and she's kind of the center of the mystery that Beatrix was there to look into and solve and figure out what was going on. But like I talked about earlier, without this being a mystery and kind of starting with the end result of, at the time, Sage's, now Penelope's progression and timeline, we were kind of going in reverse, solving a mystery, but now we're going along with Penelope and seeing how all of this kind of develops and how it gets to what it gets to. So this is going to be the reader's first introduction to Arya. And I don't really give any history of her at this point. I just plop her into the story. The only thing that the reader really learns about her here, on a personal level, is that she is a musician and she loves and is passionate about music, which is a contrast to Penelope, who sees really no value in music. It's not going to help her achieve anything. She doesn't care about it, but, it's important to Arya, so it's going to be important to her. And Arya is shown to be the real object of Penelope's affection. As soon as they're in the car together, it's made pretty obvious by the way that they talk to each other, the way that they look at each other, and just their interactions, that they are who each other wants. If they were open to live their lives however they wanted, they would be together. But neither of them are free to show that. So this is completely secret. Nobody else knows about them. And the reader will get more details about that later. I didn't want to get into that here because the main goal of this scene is to show this third world that Penelope is part of and the potential consequences of her chosen path in life and how she's choosing to deal with all of the other crap that has been introduced so far. So as the two girls are driving away from where Arya picks her up, Arya senses that she's in a pretty bad mood, asks if she wants to talk, but Penelope says no and they just move on. So I'm trying to show the depth of their relationship, that they know each other well, they understand each other, they know each other's limits, they respect those limits, at least most of the time. And this is not a new thing. This is an established routine for them. And they don't really have to say much to each other to know what they need and how the night's going to go and all of that. So there's fairly little dialogue in this one. It's pretty short and sweet when they are talking to each other. Most of it is just their interactions and the way that, Arya watches Penelope as she's changing clothes and the way she touches her, the way that they, even just look at each other and how Penelope thinks about Arya in those few moments when they're in the car. So hopefully I'm establishing at this point the deep connection that they have and adding in some level of spice to this. And that's where I kind of got stuck after this chapter because I wasn't sure how graphic I want this to be. Because again, I need to keep that balance of likability and sympathy with Penelope, even as she is about to kind of embark on this path that most readers are going to go, whoa, this is not okay for a teenage girl to be doing. Because as they're in the car, Arya asks Penelope where she wants to go, and she gives her 2 club options. And Penelope chooses the one that she feels is a bit more edgy, has a little bit more danger, because that's kind of the mood she's in. That's the day she's had. She needs some aggression. She needs some spark there that she can kind of fight with. And so at first, it'll kind of be revealed a little bit more later, what their true intention is by going to this club. They're not just going out to blow off steam, but I didn't want to jump right into that because I want to set the stage. This chapter is mainly about showing the relationship between Arya and Penelope and the fact that it is completely secret from every other aspect of their lives. Rhys has no idea about this. Her parents, no clue. It is a tightly held secret for both the characters, but they're also about to walk into a busy club and engage in what they feel is kind of their way out part of life, of the lives that they're in right now. And so I get a little bit in this chapter, like I show the sexual tension between them. There's some looks, some references, some touching, where Arya is being a bit physical, but they're also in a rush because Penelope has a deadline that she's got to make it back to her house cleaned up and, exactly the same as she looked leaving by 11 o'clock. So that doesn't leave them much time because I think I have them leaving the house, or Penelope leaves the house at 8 o'clock. And they've got to drive, into the downtown area where they're going to find the clubs. So this has got to be kind of a quick turnaround time. And I think I hint enough that the reader knows what is going to come next, that they're kind of looking for targets and someone who they're going to be able to manipulate and control. And so I want to set them up for the idea of what's coming next, that things are about to get a bit more risky and edgy and a little bit dangerous. But I think I don't want to go too far into the true depth of what these two girls do when they go out. This is kind of the softer introduction to the darker side of their lives and what they're up to and what they're willing to do to escape the lives that they're currently in. Mostly on Penelope's side. I'm still kind of debating Arya's backstory. I'd had kind of an idea of it in the original version, that she had a somewhat stable home, that this was more immaturity and need for adrenaline and danger out of just that youthful stupidity kind of a mindset for Arya, and then things kind of get out of hand. Whereas Penelope, she has some genuine reasons for wanting to escape her life and get away from her parents and her family, but still protect her siblings. And I'm kind of, I don't know, because I had this idea of who Arya was before, and then I had planned to bring in this complication of, at some point, Penelope, in the original version, it was Sage, develops a relationship of some sort with Arya's mother. Not necessarily sexual, but Penelope doesn't have this loving, caring mom, and Arya does. And so she kind of falls into needing and wanting Arya's mom to replace what she doesn't have, and that causing a lot of conflict. But I think it would make more sense that both of these girls keep what they're doing with each other and their relationship with each other completely separate from the rest of their lives. I think it would be unrealistic for several reasons. For one, Penelope's family and the control of her time, and that gets more strict as the story goes on. So I don't think it would make sense for Penelope to have this freedom to spend time with Arya's family and to develop this competing relationship with her mom. Also, I think just story-wise, if Arya has this pretty decent family who's willing to accept her sexuality and be fairly free with her time and control, why would she be doing all of this? I think her fascination and lust and desire for Penelope, I don't think that would be a big enough reason for her to engage in some of the crazy stuff that we're going to get into. And I don't think immaturity would be enough of a reason. I think I'm going to have to lean into some deeper seated personal issues that Arya has, that even though she's got a pretty decent family, she just has these personal issues that she's not able to overcome, and she's not she's leaning into rather than trying to work on. And I don't know, I'm thinking it might need to be something that she's hidden from her family, at least to some degree, to where they would have tried to help her more if they had been aware. So I don't know. I'm still thinking on it. I think Arya's instability and her reason for engaging in dangerous, risky behaviors needs to be really personal, and maybe from some sort of earlier trauma that has caused her to kind of lose some sense of self and seek for it in these dangerous situations. And that might take me looking into kind of some aspects of psychology and do a little bit of research on what are some of the either childhood or early adolescent traumas that cause risky sexual behaviors and acting out and putting yourself in dangerous situations. Like, I know a couple off the top of my head, sexual abuse and things like that. Like, that's the first and the easiest one, but I don't know if I want to like go with that. Like, find something a little bit more out of the ordinary and complex, or if that would be like stretching too far and making it unnecessarily complicated. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to dig into Arya and her backstory a little bit more still. I had kind of initially just thought I would go with basically what I had planned for the original version. But as I'm getting into this and as I'm getting to know Penelope more, I don't think that makes sense for Arya's story. So I think I've still got some work to do because the girls are going to get involved in some really risky, dangerous behaviors. And I want it to be realistic that they would do so. And I think with Penelope, I think I'm establishing that pretty well, but I don't know about Arya. I think if she comes from too stable of a background, it just wouldn't seem realistic for her to go like this far out of control to lead to the climax in the end. So I've got to really think about that. I've also got to really think about what level of description I want to employ with some of these encounters. I touched on it a little bit in this chapter with some of the touching on the side of Arya as Penelope is changing her clothes. So I've given some little hints there. But I think one of the reasons like I really kind of paused and got stuck before moving on to chapter 6 was just I wasn't really sure how detailed I want to get on exactly what they're doing. Because like I want it to be clear that this is well out of the bounds of normal behavior. That they are mostly, pushed forward by Penelope and by her desperation, that she's leading this, and Arya is more than willing to go along and jump in and participate, that she gets either kind of like a high or a rush, or this is fulfilling some hole or pain that she has that she's like trying to cover up and deal with. She's got her own reasons for it, but Penelope is pushing this forward and leading this on. And it's a lot of risky sexual encounters, blackmailing, doing these dangerous things that could easily get them hurt, arrested in bad situations. And so like on that side of things, like obviously I don't have any problem, diving into like the nitty-gritty details of some of the schemes that they're going to get into. But I'm really kind of on the fence as far as any of the sexual content. Like, do I want to kind of like skim over that? Is that going to take away from the depth of what they're doing and really like portraying it in a way that like really sticks with the reader and makes it clear why this is such a problem? Or is too much description just going to put people off? Is it going to make her unlikable to a level that it would push readers away? I don't know. I think I'm going to have to just like dive into chapter 6 and write it however seems right at the time and then get some feedback on it. Because part of my hesitation also is, I work as a teacher right now. And so there is, that level of writing life crossing over, potentially causing any issues. And these are teenagers. Like, I don't want to, portray any behavior as okay that is not, that is risky and dangerous and illegal. I don't want to be like presenting that as like positive thing that they're doing. Like, well, obviously like this is very clearly like bad decision making on their part that is going to lead to not great consequences for them. But just, I do just have to be aware of and consider, that potential crossover of things that I write and put out into the world and how that could impact me on a personal level. So I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm leaning toward less description in that realm, kind of just making it clear the level to which they are willing to engage without actually having to get into too much description in detail. I might be willing to do a little bit more description in the moments where it's just Arya and Penelope and their expression of where they're at in their relationship. That I feel a bit more comfortable as far as portraying that to some level of detail. I still don't want to go overboard with that, because that's not the point and the focus of this story. I want to show the relationship and the problems within that without, crossing over into lines of different genres and levels of sexual content. So yeah, but it's still something I'm kind of thinking about, particularly the level of description in that realm. And then I'm still just really diving into who Arya is and why she's doing any of this with Penelope. Because I don't want it to just be she's just so committed to Penelope that she will do whatever she says. No, Arya is a strong person in her own right. She has her own reasons for doing this. Would she have maybe done everything that they'll end up doing on her own? Maybe not. She might not have had the need, the intense desire to escape and find a way out. I don't think she has that same motivation that Penelope does, but I think she has her own reasons for being willing to participate in Penelope's ideas and plans. So yeah, I'm still digging into her. We'll see how this next chapter goes, because at the end of this chapter, they get to the club. It's clear to the reader that they are there to, find some targets to make the night worthwhile to them. And so, the next chapter will kind of dig into that of what exactly do they do when they go out together at night, and how is this going to later relate to Penelope's plans and what she has in mind for her life, in contrast to what her parents and everyone else who knows her thinks she's heading toward and is trying to push her into through whatever control that they have. So that's kind of where I'm pausing at this point for this episode. This one was a bit longer because I wanted to kind of just get caught up on what I had written and remind myself of what I had written and where I'm at. So this gave me a chance to really think about Arya and the level of sexual content that this book will have. So some things that I need to work on as I'm moving forward in the next couple of chapters. And then at some point too, I'll work some more on chapter 2 of the karmic side of the project. Because yeah, like I mentioned in an earlier episode, I'm going to have to balance out the darkness of this book with some of the lighter, fun, kind of crazier and chaotic aspects of the karmic story. So that's where I'm going to leave things off for this episode. I'll be back hopefully soon-ish, heading into the last quarter of the school year, which is always kind of crazy and hectic. But I'm going to try to get some writing done in between revising and working on some other projects and the radio show and all that good stuff. But I've been wanting to get back to this and kind of going back through, catching up as far as episodes and what I've accomplished and what I still need to think about and work on has been helpful and is helping to kind of get me motivated. And I think over dinner, I'm going to chat with Chris about Arya and her backstory and see if I can focus in a little bit more on where I want to go with her. Like I said, just talking it out is helpful to me, and Chris is really good at helping me think about what questions I need to ask to find my path forward on something. So hopefully by next episode, I will have a little bit better sense of what I'm doing with her and where I want to go. But yeah, that's it for now. If you want to see any of the other stuff I'm working on and kind of follow along on my switch over from Gladden to Spinner and the mess that's kind of making of everything, stop by my website or my Substack, sign up for my newsletter. My website is now DelShereeSpinner.com, and if you just search for DelSheree, you'll find me. I'm still, I think, pretty much the only one. I'm pretty easy to find. So thanks for hanging in there, listening, hopefully hearing about this process and my chaotic thoughts and meandering way through these projects is in some way helpful to other people. If nothing else, it's helping me get through it and figure out what I need to do and where I need to focus. So thanks for listening. I will be back soon. Again, my website is DelShereeSpinner.com, and the music for this podcast is by Mon Plaisir. Thanks again, everyone. Bye-bye.